All right, let's dive into software design patterns. We got a listener request about head-first design patterns by Eric Freeman and Elizabeth Robson. I'm excited to crack this one open with you.
Me too. This book is a classic. Um, it's more than just a pattern catalog. It really dives into the why behind good design.
Yeah, I flipped through it a bit, and it definitely seems to emphasize the thinking behind the patterns, not just the code.
Right, and that's key. One of the things they stress is good design is all about making your code easy to change.
That's a great point, because software always evolves, right?
Exactly. Needs change, requirements get updated, you got to be able to adapt.
So how do design patterns help us do that?
Well, think of them as proven solutions to common problems.
Okay, so like having a toolbox full of pre-built components.
Yeah, but it's more than that. They embody key design principles that can really change the way you approach software.
So it's not just about copying and pasting code snippets.
Not at all. It's about understanding the principles behind those patterns and applying them thoughtfully.
Got it. So what are some of those core principles they highlight?
Well, one big one is program to an interface, not an implementation. They have this great analogy. Imagine you're building a music streaming app.
Okay, picturing it.
Now, you wouldn't want to hardcode the specifics of playing MP3 files directly into your code, right?
Right, because what if you wanted to add support for other formats later, like FLAC or OGG?
Exactly. You'd be stuck rewriting a ton of code.
But if you program to an interface, you could just swap out the implementation details.
Exactly. So instead of tying yourself to MP3s, you define an interface for music playback. And then you can have different implementations for MP3, FLAC, whatever.
Ah, I see. So it's like building an adapter that can handle different plugs.
Exactly. It's about flexibility and making sure your code can adapt to change.
I like that. Okay, so program to an interface is one principle. What else is there?
Another one is encapsulate what varies.
So like hiding the messy details and presenting a clean interface.
Sort of. It's more about isolating the parts that are likely to change. So if you have a section of code that's specific to a particular database, for example.
You would encapsulate that database logic so the rest of your code doesn't depend on it directly.
Right. That way, if you need to switch to a different database later.
You only need to change the encapsulated part, not the whole system.
Exactly. It makes your code more maintainable and less brittle.
These principles are making a lot of sense. But how do they translate into actual design patterns?
Well, let's take the strategy pattern as an example. The book uses this fun analogy with ducks.
Ducks. Okay, I'm intrigued.
So different duck species have different quacking behaviors, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Instead of hard coding each duck's quack into the duck class itself, the strategy pattern suggests encapsulating each quacking behavior as a separate object.
So it's like giving each duck a quacking module that can be swapped out.
Yeah, exactly. And this way, you can change a duck's quacking behavior at runtime without modifying the duck class.
So it's like having different voice boxes you can plug into the duck.
Exactly. And this pattern is super useful in software. Imagine you have a reporting system that needs to generate reports in different formats, like PDF, Excel, CSV.
I see where you're going with this. You could use the strategy pattern to create separate formatting objects for each format.
Exactly. And you could easily add new formats in the future without modifying the core reporting class.
That's a great example. So we have the strategy pattern for managing different behaviors. Any others that use this encapsulation principle?
Absolutely. The observer pattern is another one. Imagine you have a weather station that collects weather data.
Got it. We have our weather station.
And let's say you have multiple displays that need to show this data. A digital display, a mobile app, maybe a website.
Okay, so the weather station is the source, and the displays are all dependent on it.
Exactly. And you wouldn't want the weather station to have to know the specifics of each display.
Right. It shouldn't care if it's updating a website or a phone app.
Exactly. That's where the observer pattern comes in. It lets the weather station announce, hey, my data has changed. And any display that's interested can grab the latest information.
So it's like a broadcast system.
Yeah. And the displays can subscribe or unsubscribe as needed.
That's pretty cool. So the weather station doesn't need to know who's listening. It just sends out the update.
Exactly. It keeps things loosely coupled and flexible.
This is amazing. So we've got the strategy pattern for managing behavior, the observer pattern for dependencies. Are there patterns that focus on making our code more understandable, like easier to work with?
Definitely. The decorator pattern is a good one for that. Think of it like ordering a coffee.
Okay, I love coffee, so I'm with you.
You start with the basic coffee, but then you might add milk, sugar, syrup, all that good stuff.
Yeah, building up my perfect cup.
And in software, the decorator pattern lets you add responsibilities to an object dynamically, without changing its underlying code.
So it's like wrapping our basic coffee object with additional layers for each extra.
Exactly. You could have a milk decorator, a sugar decorator, and so on.
And you can add or remove these decorators at runtime without messing with the core coffee class.
Right. It's a very elegant way to extend functionality.
I'm really starting to see how these patterns can help us write better code. It's not just about solving the immediate problem, it's about making our code more adaptable and maintainable in the long run.
Absolutely. And there's so much more to explore in head-first design patterns. We've only just scratched the surface of some of the fundamental patterns.
I'm already feeling like I've leveled up my understanding of software design.
It's a journey, and this book is a great guide.
I can't wait to dive into more patterns and see what other gems we can uncover.
Me too. There's a whole world of design wisdom waiting for us.
This is really eye-opening stuff. It's like learning a secret language for software design.
It is kind of like that, yeah.
But I'm also realizing there are so many patterns. How do we even know which one to use when?
That's a great question. And the book actually addresses that directly. Design patterns aren't like a magic bullet you can just apply anywhere.
Okay, so it's not just about memorizing a bunch of patterns.
Nope, it's more about understanding the problems each pattern solves and knowing when it's the right tool for the job.
Got it. So it's about choosing the right tool from the toolbox.
Exactly, like you wouldn't use a hammer to tighten a screw.
Right, that makes sense. So is there like a mental checklist we can use to figure out which pattern fits best?
Well, there's no one-size-fits-all answer, but the book encourages us to think about a few things. First, what problem are you actually trying to solve?
Okay, so start with the problem itself,
Right, then consider the trade-offs of each pattern.
because each pattern has its pros and cons.
Exactly. Some patterns are more complex than others, some are more flexible, some have performance implications.
So it's about weighing those trade-offs and choosing the best fit for the situation.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment.
So try out different patterns and see what works best in practice.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to refactor if something isn't working.
I like that. It's an iterative process.
It is, and the more experience you gain, the better you'll become at recognizing those patterns and applying them effectively.
This is so cool. It's like learning a new way of thinking about software. But are there any pitfalls we should watch out for when using patterns?
Oh, definitely. One of the biggest pitfalls is overengineering.
I can see that happening. You get all excited about these new patterns and you want to use them everywhere.
Exactly, and you end up with this overly complex system that's hard to understand and maintain.
So it's about finding the right balance between using patterns effectively and keeping things simple.
Absolutely. The authors of Head First Design Patterns put it really well. They say, the goal of design patterns is to increase flexibility, not to show off how many patterns you know.
I love that quote. It's a good reminder to focus on solving the problem, not just using fancy patterns for the sake of it.
Exactly. Patterns are a means to an end, not the end goal itself.
It's all about writing clean, maintainable code that solves real problems.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Now, I'm curious, are all design patterns about creating new code from scratch? Or can they help us adapt existing code?
Oh, they can definitely help with adapting existing code. One pattern that comes to mind is the adapter pattern.
The adapter pattern. Didn't you mention something about that earlier? Like those travel adapters for electronics?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. The adapter pattern basically acts as a bridge between two incompatible interfaces.
Okay, so like translating between two different languages.
Exactly. Imagine you have a legacy system with an old interface, and you need to integrate it with a newer system that expects a different interface.
Sounds like a common problem.
It is. And instead of rewriting the entire legacy system, you can use the adapter pattern to create a wrapper that adapts the old interface to the new one.
So it's like a translator between the two systems.
Exactly. It allows them to communicate without having to understand each other's internal workings.
That's so clever. It saves us from having to rewrite tons of code.
Exactly. It's all about reuse and making things work together seamlessly.
This adapter pattern sounds like a real lifesaver.
It can be. It's a powerful tool for integrating different systems and making your code more adaptable.
I'm starting to see how all these patterns fit together. It's like building a software ecosystem where everything can communicate and evolve smoothly.
That's a great way to think about it. And it's all thanks to the power of design patterns.
And Head First Design Patterns has been such a fun and insightful guide through this world.
It really has. They've done an amazing job of explaining these concepts in a clear and engaging way.
I'm so glad we got a listener request for this one. It's been a real eye-opener.
Me too. It's always fun to revisit the classics and rediscover the gems they hold.
Wow. I feel like we've just scratched the surface of what Headfirst Design Patterns has to offer.
It's true. There's so much depth to this book. One thing that really stands out to me is how they don't just throw the patterns at you.
Right, they really emphasize the why behind each pattern, the problem it solves, the trade-offs involved.
Exactly. They want you to understand the thinking behind the pattern, not just memorize the code.
And they also highlight the importance of using patterns appropriately.
Oh, yeah. They even have a whole section on anti-patterns, which are basically common design mistakes that can lead to bad code.
Anti-patterns, that's an interesting concept.
It is. It's like a warning sign saying, hey, don't go down this road. It leads to trouble.
I like that. It's like they're giving us a map of the software design landscape, showing us the safe paths and the dangerous ones.
Exactly. And they also provide a lot of guidance on how to choose the right pattern for a given situation.
It's not just about memorizing a catalog of patterns. It's about developing a design sense, a feeling for when a particular pattern might be a good fit.
Right, and that comes with experience. The more you work with these patterns, the better you'll get at recognizing the problems they solve and knowing when to apply them.
I'm also really appreciating how the book uses real-world examples and analogies to explain these concepts.
Oh, absolutely. The duck example for the strategy pattern, the coffee shop analogy for the decorator pattern, those analogies make the patterns so much easier to grasp.
It's like they're taking these abstract ideas and grounding them in something familiar and relatable.
Exactly. It's like they're saying, hey, this pattern isn't some weird esoteric thing. It's actually quite practical, and it's based on how things work in the real world.
I think that's one of the things that makes this book so effective.
Definitely. It takes a topic that could be really dry and technical and makes it fun and engaging.
I'm finding myself wanting to read more, even though it's a technical book.
Me too. It's a page turner. And that's saying something for a book about software design patterns.
So to wrap things up, if our listener is looking to level up their software design skills and learn how to create more elegant, flexible, and maintainable code, Headfirst Design Patterns is an excellent place to start.
Absolutely. It's a book that can really change the way you think about software design and give you a powerful set of tools to tackle any challenge.
It's a must-read for any aspiring software developer.
Couldn't agree more. So to our listener, we encourage you to dive into Headfirst Design Patterns and unlock the secrets of great software design.
That's a wrap on our deep dive into Headfirst Design Patterns. We hope you enjoy the journey and are excited to apply these patterns and principles to your own software adventures.